Okay, today we are going to be talking about measuring, marking, and layout. And we are going to show you what the skills are that you need to learn in this chapter. In your chapter you have lead-up exercises, and they're going to ask you to use certain tools in certain ways. So what I'm going to do is demonstrate today how to use those tools. First thing we're going to start off with is our combination square. Our combination square has several components. First of all, the main component is this little knob right here. As this knob is loosened, it allows the ruler to slide back and forth. This ruler can be taken all the way out and adjusted, can be used by itself. When the ruler is out, this can also be used as a level. There's a little level vial right here, and it can be used to check level, although that is not very accurate. To put it back together, you take your knob and you push it all the way up. You find the groove, and you just slide that back in and tighten your knob. Okay, so that's how to use it. This combination square gives us a couple of things that we can use. First of all, this is our 90-degree angle right here. In this class, you're going to hear me say square quite a bit. That's what we're referring to, is it at 90-degree angle. Then over on this side, you can see we have a 45-degree angle. Okay, those are both used for marking. So what I'm going to ask to do is open this up so your square has the longest edge on the 90-degree angle, and we're going to tighten it up. Then you're going to put your square somewhere in the middle of the board. Put this butt edge of the square tight up against the wood, and we're going to scribe a line. So what we're going to do is we're going to check this square to see if it gives us parallel lines. If it doesn't, we either have a bad square or the edge of our board is crooked, or you're not holding your square tight up against the edge. All right? So I did a line this way. I'm going to flip the square over, and I'm going to do a line the opposite, just right next to it, facing the opposite direction. Okay, so I should have two solid lines right next to each other. As you can see, they're about the same distance. So that's good, so I can say that they're parallel. And I'm going to label that on the line. Label, every time you do something, label what you've done. All right, the next activity asks you to take the square and slide it towards the end of the board. As we get towards the end of the board, we're just going to scribe a line on there. And that line just tells me, number one, that you did the exercise. But number two, it can tell you whether the board's square. So if I wanted to check to see if my board was nice and square and straight, I could put this square right up against the edge and tell. So this one is square, so I'm going to write square on it. Now we're going to flip it over and we're going to do the other side. So as I slide towards this end and I scribe, we can tell that we very narrow here, very big here. This end is out of square. So I've labeled it out of square. Okay, so that's two things that you should do. Next, we're going to readjust this. We're going to loosen up the knob, and we're going to slide it so it's towards the 45 side. Then you're simply going to put the butt edge right up against here, and you're going to draw a 45-degree angle. And we'll label this 45 degrees. Okay, that one's real simple. All right, next. I want you to draw a parallel line. So right parallel from this edge in, I want a line at 4 inches. So the easiest way is if we will just set our speed square, or our combination square, to the 4-inch mark and tighten the knob. I'm going to turn the board this way so I can do this easier, maybe you can see better. Once this is like this, you can take the square and write it right along the edge of the board. As you do that, you can also take your pencil and as you pull both of them at the same time, you'll get a perfectly 4-inch parallel line going across the board. So I'm going to label this 4-inch parallel. And with that, I am done with my combination square. All right, the next tool that we're going to talk about is our speed square. The speed square is basically a triangle. It comes in a smaller and larger size. It has a ruler on this end. It has degrees on this, and then this in here is used to help us lay out our rafters in roof framing. It also, as you can see from this side, it has a lip right here. That lip is very helpful because it allows us to put it up right against the board very easily. Okay? So we're going to flip this board over, and we're going to do a couple of things. First of all, we're going to check the ends for square again, just like you did with the combination square. I'm going to scribe a line. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to scribe a line on this side. This one was square, and this one is out of square. Next, I need you to do a 45-degree angle. So rather than using this side, all we got to do is use this side. And you're going to just scribe me a line and label it 45 degrees. Okay, so there's 2 tasks. Now the third one, I want you to give me a 22.5-degree angle. Now we can easily do that right here. It has an arrow pointing this corner. This is our pivot point. If I keep this tight against the board, I can pivot to any degree right there. So there's a 40, there's a 30. If I want 22.5, I'm looking for this portion right here, and I want to come to this portion of the square. So I'm going to put that to where it matches up right with the side. And when that happens, I can come back and scribe this line right next to my pivot. And I have a 22.5-degree angle. Okay? So there's the 3 tasks I'm going to ask you to complete with this speed square. All right. The next thing we're going to use is our compass. A compass is really anything that can help you draw a circle. This particular compass has a point, it has a pivot, and it has a lead or a pencil. Now, to use the compass, it's really simple. You get it set to the proper radius, and radius is half the circle. And once it's set there, you simply draw it. So I'm going to bring my speed square back over. We're going to ask that you set this at a 2-inch radius. So a 2-inch radius I can set at any one of these numbers. If I set it 6, I'm going to open the pencil to 4. If I set it at 5, I'm going to go to 3, so on. So you want to be 2 inches apart. Then we want to find on that 45-degree line that you drew, we want to find about the halfway mark. So this is about 7 3/4 of an inch. So at about 3 5/8. Sorry, 3 3/8. No. 3 7/8. I can put a mark. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to kind of get to the middle of the board. I'm then going to take my compass, I'm going to put my point on the mark, and if it's set at the 2 inches, I should just be able to draw. Okay, so I'm kind of going over it so I can get a good dark line. And then I'm going to label this 2-inch radius. And that particular one is done. Now, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to use this side now. Now what we're going to ask is that we put an arc on this next exercise. And an arc is any portion of a circle. So an arc could be a 3/4 or it could be a half. We're going to do a half arc on this one. So what we're going to need is we want to find out how wide our board is. I'm going to grab our tape measure, and as I put it up here, I can see that I'm 5 3/8 of an inch. So I know I got to find halfway point. I know that half of 5 is 2 1/2. But what is half of 3/8? Well, half of 3/8 is 3/16. So 1, 2, 3. So right here is my halfway point this way. But now what I want you to do is I want you to come back from the line that you marked where square was, and we're going to come back 3 11/16. So it's never really accurate to put it like this. So we're going to put the measuring tape starting at 1 inch, which means I need to add an inch to the end. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 11/16 is about right here. So where those two lines meet, I'm going to draw a line all the way across this board. And then where this 3 11/16, got to take that back. Let's back up. I did 3 11/16. It should have been 2 11/16. There's a good example. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, no, I just messed that up, that you're going to mess up the project. So 1, 2, and 11/16. All right. Now we're on the right track. We're going to draw the line across. And as you can see, I have my intersecting mark right here. All right, so now all I need to do is get I have two things I could do. I could put it on here, and I could get 2 11/16. Okay, once I have that, I put it on here, and I embed that point in the wood. Am I touching the side of the wood there? Am I touching the side there? And am I touching the line? Yes, I am. So now I'm just going to draw that arc. Okay, and I'm going to label this arc. And that's done. Now I can go to the other end of the board, and we're going to kind of have a same type of an exercise. This time I'm going to use my combination square, and I am going to go exactly 1 inch from the line that I made. Okay, so I'm going to set that right up there on the inch mark, and I'm going to just scribe a line on the end. Then if I turn it sideways, I can do the same thing. Put that on the inch mark, and I get a crosshair. All right, now let me do the other side the same way. One inch that way, 1 inch this way. Okay, you can see I have my crosshairs on each side. So what we're going to do is a 1 inch quarter arc, and what we could use this for is to round off our corners on our board. So I'm going to set this to 1 inch. I'm going to put this on here. Am I touching the edge of the board? Am I touching the line? Yes, I am. So I can draw my arc. Check the other side. Okay, and so you can see I got my quarter arc on each side. All right, so 2-inch circle, half arc, quarter arc. You're done with the compass. All right, next we're going to put the board off to the side for a minute. You should have a worksheet. If not, ask your instructor for it. When we're going to use a protractor. Now, a couple items with the protractor. Your protractor has a baseline going across it. That needs to be put on the baseline of your reading that you're taking. Then it has a circle right in the middle. When you have your angles, where the angles connect needs to be right here on this circle. Okay. So here's your worksheet. What I'm asking is that you put this right on the baseline. I have the area where my angles connect. And if it's accurate, if you get it a little crooked, it's going to give you a bad reading. So make sure it's exactly accurate. And then come out here and read your angle. Now, one of the things I've done is I have extended all my lines by putting my protractor on and then just drawing my line further out. Okay, if you don't do that, you're going to have a hard time making these readings. So I put that on there, get my reading, and I'm going to put my reading right here. It's so many degrees. Then I'm going to take the one on the other side, and it's going to be so many degrees. Do they match? And you're going to answer a yes or no question. If they don't, you're just going to write no in here in between these angles. Then you're going to go down and check this one. Do they match? Yes or no? Check this one. Do they match? Yes or no? Check this one. Do they match? Yes or no? One of these is a yes. The other three are no's. All right? And that's all I'm asking you to do with the protractor on this one. Okay. The next tool we're going to use is called the sliding T-bevel. And our sliding T-bevel has a knob right here. When it's loosened, this slides out and we can adjust this to any angle. So if we need to copy an angle, we can use this, or if we need to set an angle, we can use this. There's two ways I could use to set an angle. I can use my protractor, and at which case I want to get it right on my center mark again, and I can adjust it to wherever I want. In this case, I'm going to ask that you adjust and set me up a 75-degree angle. So I'm pretty close right there. All right. Another way that you could use it is use your speed square. Put this on the base, bring it right into your pivot point, and it should be really close to hitting your 75-degree mark, which this one is. It's like a 74.5. So I can make a quick adjustment, and I got my 75 degrees. All right. Then I'm going to ask that you bring your board back. Somewhere on your board, you put that, get it tight up against the edge, and mark a 75-degree angle. Okay? And that's all you're going to use your protractor. The other use for a protractor is we may be able to, let's say we have angles or something we want to copy over board to board. We set it here, and we have this board done, and we go to our next board. We can put it right on there and copy that angle over and over and over again, so it's the same on all of them. All right. Okay, so that's our sliding T-bevel. Now we're going to put this board aside. You're going to have a bigger board, and I'm going to bring this board on. And this bigger board is going to be provided by your instructor. And what we are going to use with this board is we're going to use the framing square. So I'm going to bring the framing square in here. It's a little bit bigger tool. This would be used more for checking our angles, seeing if a project's square. And there's a bunch of measurements and stuff on here. Those were used for calculating our roof rafters. What you do have to be careful is each one of these rulers on the side, these measuring devices, they may not be what you're used to. So for instance, we're used to measuring in 16ths. This side is in 12ths, this side is in tenths, this side is in 12ths, and this side is in 26ths. So when we flip it over, all of this side is in 16ths. And 16ths is our basic core of measurement. So what I'm going to ask you to do with this is our square has two components. This is called the tongue. It's the shorter, skinnier side. And this is the blade or the body. And that's the wider, longer side. We're going to ask you to put the tongue against the edge of the board and make sure it's nice and tight up against the edge of the board. And you're going to come scribe a line. Then you're simply going to flip it over and get it close. And we're going to scribe a second line. Now, if our board is straight and the square is straight, these should be parallel. These are not parallel, which tells me that my board is crooked on this side. If I was to put a straight edge across here, I have a hump so that this goes back and forth, which makes this out of square. So if I wanted to use a square line, I need to go from this side of the board. Once you've done this, just simply put your name on the board and you're done with that activity. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about a chalk line. I'm going to bring a little bit bigger board in. Our chalk line looks like this. It has a string attached to a hook and there's chalk on there. And when you snap that chalk line, it leaves a permanent line. So what I'm going to ask you to do is on each side of this board, I'm going to ask you to measure a distance. In this case, I'm going to measure 8. You pick the distance. It's something that hasn't been done. Then we go over to the other side of the board. We're going to mark the same line. Then you're simply going to hook the hook right over your mark, making sure your string lines up with your mark. And the other end, you're going to pull tight. And you're going to hook it over the line on the other end. I don't know if it's big enough for you to see. But once that happens, you're just going to take the string, pull it up as high as you can, and snap it. Once it's snapped, reel your string back in, and you're going to see that you have a line left on there. Sign your name to that line, and you're done with that one. Okay, I'll move this out of the way. All right, that leaves us with a couple more items. And basically what we're going to be using is our tape measure. I'm going to be asking you to make about 7 measurements. The first measurement being the length of the board. So I would ask that you hook it onto the square end and you measure the shorter side of the board. So for me, I end up right here, which is 12 1/4. So I can put right here 12 1/4 of an inch, and I could put arrows telling me that it's 12 1/4 this way. Next, I want you to measure this way, and we've already done this once, but I came up with 5 3/8. So I'm just going to place 5 3/8 with arrows showing me which way I'm going. Always make sure you label whether it's inches or feet. Okay. Now, from the square end of the board, I'm going to ask you to give me some measurements on this board. When we place measurements, we use what we call a crow's foot. And a crow's foot is simply starting at the measurement and marking down and then bringing another arrow. So it's basically giving us a V. what generally happens is this tells us where to cut, and this tells us on which side to cut. So if I was going to put the saw on this side and get rid of this, I would put my arrow this way. If I wanted to cut the other side, it would look like that. Okay? So I'm going to ask that you mark in crow's feet. The first measurement I'm going to ask is 1 3/4. Okay, so as I get this up here, I'm going to mark like that, and I have my 1 3/4 measurement. So I'm going to label that 1 3/4 of an inch. All right, next, we got a 2 1/8. And these are really close together, so I'm going to move this one down a little bit. I get right at my 2 1/8. I come down and give me a crow's foot. I'm going to mark that 2 1/8 inch. Then I got a 6 1/4. So I'm going to put my tape measure up there. My 6 1/4 is right there. Then I got an 8 7/16. And I got a 9 5/8. Okay. So one thing that you may want to understand with the tape measure and measuring is if you count every space in between every little line, you're going to know what your bottom number is on your measuring device. So, for instance, if I count every space and I come up with 1 6, that is my denominator. I have 16 spaces in that inch. If I was to come up with 8, then my denominator would be 8. If I was to come up with 24, then it would be 24. Okay? That's how that works. Then when you start counting every little space, the first space would be 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, so on and so forth. So if I come up with a number that is 8/16, one thing that we need to do is reduce. We don't ever call it 8/16. That reduces down. So if we were to divide by 2, 8 divided by 2 becomes 4. 16 divided by 2 becomes 8. The key is this number even or odd? If it's an even number, we need to keep reducing by 2. Then we come up with 4, 2/4, reduced by 2, and we come up with 1/2. So 8/16 would actually be 1/2. Okay? Here's another little trick. Every line is a 16th. Every other line, so here, 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 and here is an 1/8. Every fourth line is a 1/4. And every 8th line is a 1/2. So that biggest line in the middle, you know that's automatically a 1/2. The next biggest line is automatically a 1/4. So those three would become quarters, because 2/4 reduces down to 1/2. Then every other line, so your next biggest line, they're all 8ths. There's 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and then 8/8 is a full inch. And then every one is a 16th. So that might help you when you're getting your measurement done. Okay, you at this point have completely completed your assignment. Please make sure your name is on this, and I would suggest to put your name on the edge or the end of the board. Make sure your name is on your paper. Then you're going to turn both of these into me for your grade. Once that is done, make sure you do your review so you are prepared and ready for your test, which will be coming up in a few days. That is all for this chapter. Our next chapter will be hand tools. Thank you.